Greetings, everyone. You might be wondering why I have this guitar with me, but first, I would like to ask you a question. What is the first thing that comes to mind when I ask you about music? Now, music has always been seen as this performing art, in which the performer pretty much generates sound and he expresses himself artistically, such as plugging the strings on his guitar. And of course, that can be pleasing to some, not pleasing to others. However, there is another side of music that is not about just the performance. There is a medical side to it, actually, and it is called music therapy. Now, I chose this topic because I am a musician at heart, and I love music. I also believe that music is for everyone, and that the whole purpose of a musician is to make his audience have a good time. And so, I went to the EBSCO database, and I also went to Google Scholars, and I got some articles, and I wish to convey this information with you, which hopefully you will see the benefits that this can bring to you as well. So I will be talking about the positive benefits that music has had ever since its inception in the 50s. Now, according to Nora Landis-Shack, since the creation of the National Association for Music Therapy and the Certification Board of Music Therapists, music therapy was accepted as a legit practice since the 1950s. And so I will be focusing on three groups of individuals, or patients, I might say, who have benefited greatly from music therapy. And that is patients who suffer from Alzheimer's disease, patients who suffer from stress, and patients who suffer from cancer. So the first group, of course, is also suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Now, Alzheimer's disease is described as a progressive mental deterioration that can occur in middle or old age due to a generalized degeneration of the brain. Now, think about it. Degeneration of the brain. That means that the disease is constantly eating away at the brain, which means that this individual is having a hard time recalling many aspects of his life as well as many aspects of himself. Now, there was an experiment carried out by Carol A. Prickett and Randall S. Moore, in which they managed to get 10 patients who suffer from Alzheimer's, and they made them undergo music therapy. And in this therapy, the therapist was supposed to speak to these individuals, and after he spoke to them, read a poem, and then sing a song. And at the end of the session, he was to ask questions regarding those three aspects of the session, and he hoped to see if they could recall. And surely enough, these patients were not able to recall the spoken words or the poems. However, 4 out of 10 patients were able to recall their hometowns from listening to the songs that the therapist performed. Now, granted, these questions were not originally meant to be asked, but they decided to ask to see what would happen. The other question that was answered also by 6 out of 10 patients was their birthdays. So 6 out of these 10 patients were able to recall their birthdays. Now, this is quite amazing, simply because this disease is degenerating their brain, yet they are able to recall these things. This has a great implication since it means that music can essentially help these people remember things a lot better than if they just speak to people or if they read poems. That is quite impressive, actually. Now, the next group of people is those who suffer from stress. Granted, according to Suzanne B. Hanser, about 75% of all medical conditions are attributed to stress, such as depression, anxiety, and most dramatically PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, stress is defined as a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. And to put things in perspective, the patients who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder are the most extreme cases, because these patients, they tend to be veterans of war who have experienced a traumatizing event in their life, which triggers episodes in which they sometimes black out or act more violent due to not being able to cope with the event. And so essentially, in a theoretical review written by Nora Landis-Shack and her associates, she noted of one experiment that was carried out in which 17 patients who suffer from PTSD were separated into two groups. One group which received music therapy and the other one which did not. And what it discovered was that the music therapy group actually recorded less PTSD events or episodes than did the other group. And essentially, this means that music therapy prevented these individuals from having post traumatic stress disorder episodes, which means that if it could prevent that, then for sure it could prevent many other forms of stress by relaxing the individual through the release of substances in the brain that, of course, makes everything slow down. And essentially, of course, there's a bunch of variables that are still being studied, but this has great implications for the future of this type of disease or this type of stress, And at last, the last group I would like to talk about is those who suffer from cancer. And you might be wondering, how does music help patients who suffer from cancer? Well, surprisingly enough, in an experiment carried out by Samrika Bure and Fatima De Silva, I'm sorry if I mispronounce those names, but in the study that they performed, they got 50 patients who suffered from various types of cancers, such as lung cancer, breast cancer, or different types of cancers in general. And they divided them into two groups as well. Now, both groups were receiving chemotherapy and physical therapy, but one group was receiving music therapy and the other one did not. And what they discovered was that the group that was undergoing music therapy suffered less pain according to the measurements they used for pain. They suffered less pain than the other group. And of course, you might know that this is an amazing result because it implies that now music has a physical and physiological aspect to it. And that is quite impressive because what they discovered was that there's substances that are released in the brain when patients are exposed to pleasing music or music that they enjoy. And of course, these substances act as pain relief. And this has great implications in the medical field because that means that now music can be considered as a substitute in the future for pain relief medication. And of course, before we go on, I wish to describe cancer, which is of course a disease caused by an uncontrolled division of normal cells in the body. Now, that is quite impressive that these people who are having abnormal cells can have pain relief. And as for that, that is the points I wanted to get across. In conclusion, this video was meant to tell you the benefits, the positive benefits brought about by music therapy. And it was also meant to show you the types of people or patients who have benefited greatly from this, that being the Alzheimer's patients, patients who suffer from stress, and of course the patients who suffer from cancer. And hopefully this presentation or speech makes you realize that music is indeed much greater than just a performing art. It can go much further. It has many benefits, and you should definitely listen to it. That way, you know for sure that you won't take music for granted anymore since you know all the benefits that it brings. Thank you for your time. Take care.